Welcome to another episode of the LandSkyAI Podcast. My name is Colton Terry, and today we're joined by our esteemed advisor, Howard Belfor. He has over 40 years of experience in the security industry as a certified protection professional. How are you doing today, Howard?
I'm doing great, Colton, and thank you. Thank you for just keeping me 5 years younger by saying only 40 years. I joined the industry in 1976, by the way. I was watching a movie at that time. It was called The Graduate, a movie that Dustin Hoffman starred in before you were born. And at that time, they asked Dustin Hoffman what his future plans were for a career. And he said, plastics.
Plastics.
And I thought, I wonder about electronics. Then I read a book by a guy named Alvin Toffler, who wrote a book called Megatrends. And it really excited me. So I decided, well, I think I'm going to start looking for a job in electronics. Now, I didn't know much about electronics, but in those days, there were no Indeeds and web searches and cell phones and things that we think are pretty much ubiquitous today. If you were looking for a job in those days in the New York metropolitan area where I live, you ended up capturing a New York Times Sunday edition, going to the business section and looking for a box ad. They called them. They were about a 3-inch by 3-inch ad, the name of the company, the logo, what they were looking for. And anything that had the title electronics in it, I sent out my sparkling new resume. And, I got a couple of hits. I got interviewed by electronics guys. UPC, Universal Product Codes readers were coming out then. Barcode readers, inventory systems. And I landed an interview with a company called Rusco Electronic Systems. So I went to the interview, and they showed me a little movie of a Bell and Howell projector thing of a guy using a card to go in places. And I thought, what the hell is that? And anyway, I watched it. I interviewed, wearing my Rob Roy black shoes and my blue suit with my white shirt, Dressed for Success by Erica Fromm. And bottom line is, they called me back. They offered me the job. And I still couldn't figure out, there were only at that time 3 access control manufacturers in the entire North America: Schlage Electronic Systems, Card Key Systems, and Rusco. In fact, there were only 2 ATMs in all of New York City, if you can imagine that. And at any given time, one of them wasn't working. Well, I got the job. I enjoyed it. I won't bore you with the whole career path, but I went from there to a New York City, 42nd Street North, northern half of New Jersey guy, all the way up to ultimately being a regional manager, 32 states, sales manager for North America, different companies, staying in the same ecosystem, starting my own companies, being on the, and right up to and including being on the board of directors of ASIS International, which is the American Society for Industrial Security, where I've been a member since 1989, I guess. And in addition to all of that, I was the vice president for their Physical Security Council, frequent speaker, educator. I got an auditor's certification for processes in our industry. And I just always loved it. It's a great industry, and I've really had a good time. Plus, gave me the freedom of traveling, the freedom of seeing what... When I was a kid, you drive down the New Jersey Garden State Parkway and look out the window, and I always wondered, what's going on inside that building? And in this particular industry, I get to go inside those buildings.
And in that timeline, where did you kind of see the introduction or the emergence of robotics?
Very interesting question. While at ASIS International for many, many years, I was not only a speaker, but was one of a committee of people that selected the speaking topics. And it must be at least 10 years ago where I started to see the emergence of topics around drones and robotics. And in fact, ASIS International, probably 8 years ago or more, had a drone stage. They introduced an area where they were emerging technologies, and drones and robotics was amongst them. At the time, I wouldn't say I was skeptical, but I just didn't quite get how they were going to manage the terrain, manage who was going to operate it, how much should they cost, those things. But my introduction to them for use in the security controls marketplace probably goes back about 10 years.
Wow. And since then, how have you kind of seen these things evolve, especially in the security industry, and how that kind of impacts, say, regular cameras or regular security operations on sites?
But, the developments in the marketplace have been extremely friendly to technologies like drones. I'm a drone enthusiast myself. I own one. I've had one for about probably 6 years. I don't fly it in games, and I don't go racing through warehouses and hoops and stuff, but I have used it to do things that I sense are amongst many of the use cases. I had some wind damage a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, on my roof, and I sent up the drone to survey my house, where I discovered where the damage was and was able to contract with a roofing company. It became pretty clear to me. We also had in one of my neighboring communities, a fire problem. The fire was extinguished, but there was still some smoke. So I used my drone to fly up and over the area to see if there were any hot spots as best as I could with the camera that was used there. So it became pretty obvious to me that there were going to be opportunities for drones to be used for things like search and rescue, maybe with a thermal camera being able to determine whether there was still a fire or on the horizon or nearby, for inspections of buildings. And then, of course, as the use cases begin to grow for the autonomous drone environment, it became crowd management, inspections of... a lot of my clients in the early days had big perimeters, chemical companies, utilities, the refineries, places that...
extending that perimeter surveillance out to the outer edges of their property.
Yeah, and being able to survey it quickly without sending perhaps people into harm's way where there might be a noxious fume, some kind of other calamity. And you mentioned something earlier, too. When I first got into the industry, which sounds so many years ago at this point, over 40, cameras were huge. There were no micro cameras, people wearing them on buttons on their shirts and little Hasselblad cameras hanging off the bottom of a drone. These damn things weighed 20 pounds. So, and there were different kinds of tubes that were being used for night vision and day vision, and color wasn't even around. So with the introduction of color, CCD, chip-based cameras, reductions in size, scaling things into a more miniaturized environment. So as I look at the future, it's pretty clear to me that the miniaturization of electronics will clearly have an impact on drones. Now, there's going to be a time where being too small is not going to work in a windy environment or a rainy environment or something where needing to have some weight and stability. But it's pretty clear to me that we may find ourselves at a point in time where some spy drone could be the size of a bumblebee with a camera on it, with sound. So there's a whole host of things. Now, there's the nefarious side and the good guy side. But at the end of the day, like any technology, I think the advances in all things, whether it's advanced integration with other products, artificial intelligence added for recognizing things, being used in video, or I'm looking for something red, I'm looking for a certain height, a certain width. So all of these things are converging. And I think drones have a very interesting way to play into almost like being a first responder without it being a human.
And is there, in that kind of first responder use case, is there a specific security challenge that you've been kind of on your mind, that's been on your mind for specifically autonomous drones, other than other cases? Per se that here at LandSkyAI, we do manufacturing plants, private estates, all these different use cases. But for yourself, is there one specific use case that you think it's really gonna hit home, really gonna evolve into something larger than it is?
I think it's likely to be something based around situational awareness, where some state alert occurs, whether it's in an environmental alert, a contact alarm, a motion sensing, some kind of change in the stasis, some change in the environment that you need to be able to respond to discover, is it a errant flaw in some receipt from a sensor, or do we really have something that took place? And this could be anything from a fire, a burglary, intrusion, or fence. And so it seems to me all IoT world, Internet of Things, sensing devices now have an ability to feed into situational awareness where they might provide then a response requiring EMS, first responder, fire department, the law enforcement. But in addition, it could be a trigger to send out a drone first.
Exactly. That's kind of like the integration of old technology with new technology. Per se, when you said the chemical plant, that made me think when you have chemical sensors go off, that's also integrated into the autonomous drone in a box that can go out and do its job and kind of survey the area based on other technology that's either has cameras or doesn't have cameras, but has an action to basically send the drone to go do something.
And I don't think we're going to, at least at the moment, I think we still have the weak link and the strong link in the system at the same time as the human. Somebody having to determine what they see. We aren't yet at that point where the machine, after it gets to the situation, it needs to provide its visual or its analysis to somebody who's going to have to measure whether or not it requires next steps. From a future standpoint, autonomous could mean that the next steps just happen because the set of circumstances, the set of intelligence parameters that are displayed by the event, other sensors coming in, other motions, other alarms going off, create a protocol that eliminates the need for the human element until a couple of other steps have occurred. What that should equate to is a more rapid response, or thorough response, and the ability for responders to do more with less.
For sure. And I guess what I want to ask is kind of how do you kind of envision these integrations and robotics and drones, the evolution of them over the next 5 to 10 years?
Great question, Colton. The thing that's making this very doable are the not just the seeing use cases and developing towards them, but the underlying standardization of inputs and outputs. By that I mean when companies develop products, drones, companies develop GPS systems, we are discovering that there are certain underlying laws and engineering criteria. The video industry, led mostly by commercialization of television sets, developed an electronics criteria for that all cameras have a similar output, at least in terms of what you're going to expect in terms of the stream of data. And these, to oversimplify it, the outputs of information being reduced to digestible bits of information, and now the speed with which those bits of information, which have become standardized to receivers, drones, GPS systems, situational awareness, telephone companies, creates a very interesting, more rapid response. Look, when I grew up in a party telephone world where you picked up the phone and asked for somebody to connect you with a trunk line. Now everybody's walking around with 5G.
Yeah.
The speed of development is so rapid, and with it comes an expectation for performance. But underlying all of that performance are the ubiquity of codes and the understanding and the sharing of standards. Otherwise, AT&T, Verizon, Cellular One, all those guys would not be able to let you travel across the country because they're handing stuff off from network to network. Underneath it all is the ubiquity of a code. And I think that's the nature of the beast, is that as the marketplace starts to standardize, there'll be proprietary things, and people will develop around those things and make differentiators. But the ability for people to standardize around codes for communications are in a rapid deployment of technology.
Interesting. Well, and then kind of what do you see the future of career prospects, say whether it be in that kind of that code language or just robotics or drone operators or pretty much anything that has to do with the exportation of drone operations in the security industry?
Another almost this is the barrier. This would be the market obstacle. Like anything else, you're going to need the technical people that can repair, replace, diagnose the actual mechanical drone, what's going on. It's not going to be just changing a propeller. It's going to be getting something back in, rapidly repairing it, deployment, improving upon its operation, being able to recall products that might have, failures, doing over-the-air updates, things of that nature. We're seeing that in the world of electronic devices for automobiles. You buy a computer today, something goes wrong. They don't tell you to bring your computer back to the shop. They patch it over the internet. So the weakness to that is no internet, no updates.
True.
So
And also, go ahead.
So we're kind of in this trust environment where as long as we don't get blasted back into the Stone Age, which I think a lot of people always kind of hold as a possibility under certain circumstances. World events are pretty dicey right now. Anything's possible. But at the end of the day, as long as those things which we rely upon for that, we're going to need more engineering people. We're going to need more people that understand code. We're going to need more people that understand optics, their ability to manage the millions of pixels that are now becoming available on a camera. I mean, 1080 was a number that we all thought was a cool number for seeing something on YouTube.
Yeah.
You got a 40-foot long television set that's less than 3/4 of an inch thick and millions and millions of pixels. So all of them able to change, rotate, be three-dimensional. All of these things, all of these scientific developments are going to require not just people who can use them, but people who understand them. And we will not, I suspect that there'll be a greater need for broader understanding. So vocational schools that are going to be challenged with the new wave of electronic developments are going to have to put out men and women who understand these things to help support these industries that grow out of these technologies.
Sure. And one thing also that I wanted to touch on that you did say before is a part of that rapid response in the future is going to be that the systems are actually making those actions based on what it's kind of reading and putting out and then kind of putting out another action. But right now, as for now and the future, really the people that are running the system are enacting that rapid response. So when you actually do get to a site out of a security threat, having somebody survey that drone stream is necessary for right now and for the foreseeable future, because there is just a big gap, and there always, I think, will be a gap between robotics and humans. I
agree. And in fact, it really points to LSAI LLC's ability to have either a drone as a service where somebody can watch this remotely for them, or for the client that decides, you know what, I'm going to buy a DIB, drone in a box, and deploy it as I need and have it run through my security operations center, because the things that we are doing are ubiquitous. In other words, what we do is a stream of data that's consumable by anyone in a number of video management systems. And that's the power of standards. That is what's going to allow the growth of not only our industry, but all industries that adhere to standards. Proprietary things are not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a matter of what they do to allow their proprietary nature interact with those things that are standard.
Yes.
Even Apple and all the guys, iOS and Android, it doesn't matter. They still use a camera. The camera is going to be standard in both systems.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And that kind of also leads us to kind of talk about the word, at least in the beginning of our conversation right there, the word autonomous. So right now we use, at least in the security industry, especially with robotics, with drones, we use the word autonomous a lot. But working behind the scenes, working with the robots and the drones, and particularly what we're doing at LandSkyAI, creating the service model to survey properties, there's a lot more behind the word autonomous than it seems. I think there will always be a lot more human actions behind the word autonomous than what people realize. And that's a good thing, because I think that when it does get fully autonomous, it increases the risk for inaccuracies. So always having humans behind the robots, behind the drones, behind security operations is important for us.
You're absolutely right. You know, I mean, what comes to mind is movies like RoboCop and, you know, Terminator, and where machines sort of began to evolve to think without the human element. And, you know, when I start to think about those things, I consult my own future, and I look into my famous Magic 8 Ball, and I see today it says, concentrate and ask again. Because things are just, you know, it's the things we just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, we can imagine a future. Futurists are interesting folks, some right, some wrong. And, you know, at the end of the day, we just moved from the past to the future just now.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great kind of ending to say, really puts a pin in the conversation. Thank you, Howard Belfor, for coming on the LandSkyAI Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Cole.
Really hope to have you on again soon. Awesome.
I look forward to it. Be well, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.